Twice in history, a mighty northern empire marched south, believing it could crush a small nation in the blink of an eye. But they were all mistaken. A river turned into a death trap. An invisible battle line forced tens of thousands of soldiers to fall. And names like Lohon and Lai Thuan Kiet carved out miracles that left the imperial court in shock. How could a young nation force a colossal empire to retreat in humiliation? What truly happened on the Bac Dang River and the Nu Noyet River? And why do these battles still echo to this very day? Don't look away, because the story you're about to hear will change the way you see history. Hit that subscribe button and join me in uncovering the immortal power of the wars that shook an empire to its core. The year 979. Đại Cồ Việt rocked like a ship caught in a storm. Emperor Din Tien Hong, the founder of the Dinh Dynasty, was assassinated. In just one night, the throne fell into the hands of a child. A young empire, not yet steady on its feet, was thrown into chaos. The royal court split into factions, fighting for power. The ambitious whispered in the shadows. Generals held their swords, unsure of whom they should serve. While the nation was in turmoil, the north cast its eyes downward. The Song Dynasty, seemingly preoccupied with its own troubles, suddenly saw a golden opportunity. A new dynasty, an unstable realm. If they struck now, Đại Cồ Việt would collapse in an instant. The enemy gathered its armies. One spear was poised to strike down from Lang's son. A naval force prepared to surge in from the Bac Dang River estuary. The shadow of war spread across the southern sky. But history never follows the easy path. Amid the chaos, one man rose up. A general few expected, the man who would challenge the Northern Empire and shake the balance of power across Asia. His name was Lohon, and he was about to write a new chapter of history in blood and fire, and with a daring no one else could imagine. Could a young nation stand firm against the tidal wave from the north? Or would this be the final chapter of Đại Cồ Việt, barely born? The answer lay in the legendary battle about to unfold. When the royal court was in turmoil, when the throne of Đại Cồ Việt flickered like a candle in the wind, one unexpected name was spoken. Lohon. From a military officer in the court, he stepped onto the political stage at the very moment the nation needed a steady hand. Not born into royalty, not raised in silk and luxury, but he possessed exactly what the times demanded: courage and strategy. As the Song army prepared to thunder across the border, many within the court wanted to surrender just to protect their fragile throne. But Lohon thought differently. He knew this truth: if they bowed their heads, Đại Cồ Việt would vanish from the map forever. In that life or death moment, he chose to step forward and claim the role of leader. A bold decision, full of controversy, but the only path left if the country hoped to survive. People say that when Lohon put on his armor and marched to battle, his eyes were not those of a mere general. They were the eyes of a man defying fate. A man willing to wager everything against the northern giant. The question was no longer, will we fight? It was, can we turn weakness into strength, smallness into greatness, and make the enemy tremble on our own rivers? The choice was made. Lohon was not preparing for just another battle. He was making a declaration: Đại Cồ Việt would not be prey for any empire. And from that moment, the wheel of history rolled toward one of the fiercest battles of the nation's early days. Don't miss the next part, where we'll witness how Lohon turned the Bac Dang River into a nightmare for the invaders. Hit that subscribe button to follow this journey and keep the flame of immortal history alive. The Bac Dang River, 981. Once again, this river became the line between survival and annihilation for a nation. The Song army advanced with a massive naval force, their warships lined up like an iron wall stretching across the water. They believed that by simply sailing down this river, Đại Cồ Việt would crumble like a decayed fortress. But they had not accounted for a challenger named Lê Hoàn. He refused to let the Song march in unopposed. Instead, Đại Cồ Viet's fleet struck first. Small, nimble boats darted in and out, slashing like daggers at the northern giant. The battle drums thundered. War cries ripped through the air. On the surging river, spears and arrows rained down, turning the Song flotilla into a floating target. Suddenly, the invaders found themselves trapped. Their fleet was vast, but slow and unwieldy. From both banks, relentless assaults poured in. Chaos spread across their warships. Soldiers who thought themselves invincible panicked, trampling over one another in a frenzy of blood and water. In that maelstrom, Đại Cồ Việt achieved the unthinkable. They shattered one of the most powerful naval forces the Song Empire had ever sent. This staggering blow crushed the entire plan of attack from the river. Đằng in 981 had no hidden stakes beneath the waves, like in the days of No Buen or Tran Hung Dao. But this victory still proved an eternal truth. Any empire that dares invade will be swallowed by the river of history. As the last Song ships fled in chaos, Lê Hoàn had made his point clear. Though his nation was young, willpower and strategy could shatter even the iron grip of an empire. Yet this was only the beginning. Because on land, another Song army was preparing to descend upon Lăng. And that story is far more dramatic. Lăng, a land of rugged terrain, where history has witnessed countless life-or-death struggles. In 981, after their crushing defeat on the Đằng River, the Song army was not ready to retreat. They unleashed a ground force, marching south with the arrogance of overwhelming numbers, convinced they could grind Đại Cồ Việt into dust. Leading them was none other than Nhân Bao, a seasoned but arrogant general who once believed conquering Giao Châu would be nothing more than a military stroll. But he had no idea he was marching straight into a death trap. Lê Hoàn was waiting. He knew every mountain slope, every stream, every treacherous curve of Lăng. The Đại Cồ Việt forces avoided direct confrontation. Instead, they harassed, ambushed, and wore down the invaders at every turn. Then came the fateful day. In a sudden ambush, our forces struck directly at the enemy's camp. The clash of swords against shields rang out. Horses screamed through the valleys. The cries of the fallen mixed with the victorious shouts of Đại Cồ Việt soldiers. Nhân Bao was struck by an arrow and fell in the middle of the battlefield. The arrogant general's death shattered the morale of the Song army. The once ambitious invaders broke apart, fleeing in chaos. The victory at Lăng was more than just a battle. It was a declaration. Đại Cồ Việt may have been small, but it was not a nation to be subdued. With that, the Song invasion collapsed entirely. Now imagine, if Lê Hoàn had failed that day, how differently might Vietnamese history have unfolded? Would we still have had an independent nation to write these heroic chapters? But this was only the beginning of a new era. For with this triumph, Lê Hoàn not only crushed foreign invaders but also laid the solid foundation for the Lê Dynasty, a dynasty that would open a bold new chapter in our nation's story. The smoke of war had faded. The mountains and rivers returned to their steady breath of peace. But after those blood-soaked days, the nation was no longer the same. In 981, under Lê Hoàn command, Đại Cồ Việt defeated both the naval and land offensives of the Song Dynasty. The invaders were forced to retreat, abandoning their dream of swallowing the South. This was not merely a military triumph. It was a declaration. This small nation could stand against any empire, no matter how vast. After the resistance, Lu Hong turned to stabilizing the country. The dynasty was still young, but his victory gave him absolute authority. Generals, officials, and common people alike looked to the king who had single-handedly turned the tide. He reorganized the army, strengthened defenses, and placed particular focus on the navy. For Lu Hong understood well, the northern threat would never truly end. The nation needed a force strong enough to deter any future aggression. On the diplomatic stage, he proved himself not only a warlord but also a shrewd statesman. After victory, instead of prolonging conflict, Lu Hong sent envoys to the Song Dynasty, opening an era of peaceful relations. This was not submission, it was wisdom. A choice made to preserve peace for his people after years of turmoil. From the ashes of war, Đại Cồ Việt rose stronger than ever. Fields turned green once more. Festival drums echoed through the villages. The people believed they were living in a new era, one in which their homeland was not only independent but safeguarded by a dynasty strong enough to endure. Yet a question lingered: could a king forged in the fires of war hold his throne against the storms of court intrigue and the undercurrents of power? That would be Lu Hong's next trial, not only as a defender of the realm but as a ruler who must govern and protect his people. The palace of Hoa Lu blazed with torchlight. But behind its stone walls, peace was nowhere to be found. After the victory against the Song, Lu Hong's prestige reached its peak. He was hailed as Đại Han Hongda, the founder of the early Lu dynasty. Yet the throne was never a sanctuary. It was a blade, dazzling in its brilliance, but ready to cut down anyone careless enough to falter. Inside the court, factions secretly vied for power. Some who once followed Lu Hong with absolute loyalty now began to nurture their own ambitions. There were those who remained steadfast, but others silently waited for their chance to betray. Beyond the capital, regional warlords had not yet vanished. The country, only recently unified, still bled from the wounds of the 12 Warlords' rebellion. Even the smallest spark could ignite another fire of division. Within the imperial harem, storms brewed no less fierce. Empresses, concubines, princes, each a piece in the great game of power. Who would inherit the throne? Who would be cast aside? And looming over it all was the cruel march of time. Lu Hong, though a hero of the battlefield, could not withstand the grip of age. As his strength waned, the hungry eyes fixed upon his throne grew sharper. The early Lu dynasty now faced the danger of being consumed by internal strife, where blood might spill not on the frontier, but within the palace itself. The victory over the Song was only the beginning. Enemies outside could be defeated, but the enemies within, ambition, betrayal, and lust for power, were the forces that could drown a dynasty. Would Lu Hong have the strength to weather these storms? Or would the early Lu collapse upon the very throne he had shed blood to claim? If you want to uncover the next, most thrilling chapter, hit subscribe now. Because what follows is a blood-soaked tale of palace intrigue, where no one can predict who will be the last to survive. The throne of Đại Cồ Việt was never at peace. When Lu Hong died in the year 1005, the imperial court instantly turned into a blood-soaked battlefield. The princes, sons of the great emperor, no longer saw each other as brothers. They saw each other as enemies, as wolves fighting over prey. Each believed he was destined for the throne. But the throne could only seat one. From the inner palace, blood spilled into the court. Rebellions erupted across the land. The army fractured, generals pulled into rival factions. The people, who had just endured a war against foreign invaders, now suffered the agony of a civil war. Hoa Lu, the capital, became a war zone. The clash of swords, the terrified neigh of horses, the desperate cries echoing through the night. This was no longer the palace of a dynasty. It had become a swamp of blood and betrayal. The struggle dragged on for 8 months. One prince after another fell, some cut down on the battlefield, others assassinated in their own camps. In the end, only Long Din, the cruel younger brother, emerged from the ruins with the crown upon his head. But the price was devastating. The early Lu dynasty cracked from within. The trust of the people wavered. The glory of victory over the Song was now buried beneath shadows of betrayal and fratricide. That tragic succession was a warning. A dynasty can withstand countless enemies from outside, but it will collapse if it cannot conquer the ambitions within. And soon, history would witness another figure rise from these ashes. A man who would bring an end to the early Lu and usher in the brilliant Lai dynasty. In the year 1009, the tragedy of the early Lu dynasty reached its bitter end. Long Din, the last king, infamous for his cruelty and indulgence, sat upon the throne but could not stand firm. The people called him by a haunting name, Ngoa Tru, the king who lay down to hold court, ravaged by illness. But it was more than a sickness of the body. It was the disease of an entire dynasty, rotting from its very core. The nation needed a new light. And that light appeared in the form of Lai Tsong Yuan, a man raised in the temple, nurtured by compassion, yet carrying the will of a true sovereign. In the darkness of decline, he gained the support of ministers, the military, and the people alike. When Long Din died, the court swiftly placed Lai Tsong Yuan on the throne, opening a brand new chapter in history. This was not just a change of rulers. It was a revolution. From a dynasty drowned in blood and betrayal, Dai Viet entered the Lai era, an age of law, Buddhism, and a far-reaching vision for the nation. Lai Tsong Yuan did not stop at wearing the crown. He immediately made a decision that would echo through centuries, to move the capital from narrow, shadowed Hoa Lu to Tang Long, the land of the rising dragon, vast, open, and brimming with vitality. That was the first step for Dai Viet to rise, from a fragile young kingdom into a powerful force in the region. The fall of the early Lu was a tragedy, but it became the foundation for a glorious beginning. Once again, history proved, from ashes, a nation can be reborn stronger than ever. And this was only the beginning of wars, of triumphs, and of epic tales yet to be written on the soil of Dai Viet. Hit subscribe now to join me as we uncover the next great chapters, where history is not just the past, but a flame guiding the future.